So we are still working in chapter 6, and in this video I'm going to show you some advanced functions using our same payroll example. So I hope you have already watched Functions Payroll 1, which talks about basic functions, and reference parameters, which talks about how we can pass a parameter by reference as opposed to passing it by value, and have it change the original value of the parameter in the function. So this program is a little bit more in depth. It does the same payroll calculation, but we have more functions and a few more validation, data validation, and error checking. So notice we have a few different constants this time. We have minimum and maximum wage constants. We have minimum and maximum hours constants. So we can check to make sure that the user enters the right data. And also we have our constants that we use before base hours and the overtime rate. And here are some of our functions. The redouble function is used for data validation. So when the user enters a double number, we want to make sure it's actually a double number and not any characters mixed in there, which would not be right. So notice it doesn't take any parameters, but it returns that double number, which would be good. And then we have a function called range check, whose value is to take a value that the user enters and then check it against the minimum and maximum. Notice we have wage minimum and hours minimum and maximum to check. And it returns a Boolean value. So it returns true if the value is good. It returns false if the value is not good. Then we have calculate pay, which takes the hours and rate and does our calculation based on the overtime rate, or if it is not, then it just calculates regular gross pay. And then our final abort program, which simply quits. So now let's take a look at main. We have our variables that we have declared. We have our manipulators to output to 2 decimal places. And we have the user input here, where we read the hourly wage from the user using redouble. So we have the prompt gets displayed, then the function gets called. So let's take a look at our function. The function says declare a local variable to read that variable, or read the value into that variable, and then you check to see if cin has failed. This says while cin is in a failed state, go into the loop, clear the input buffer, or clear cin, clear the fail flag, ignore everything in the input buffer, and then ask them to enter a valid number again and read the number. So if we don't read this number, it's going to stay in this loop, which is going to be an infinite loop. So read the number again, and then we go and check again. If cin has failed, we stay inside that loop until the user enters a valid number. When the number is valid, we return the number. And we go back to where we called it from, which is right here. So when the number is good, it gets read into wage. Now we have to check and see if wage is within the minimum wage and the maximum wage, which is between 7 and 14. So you pass this wage that you read from the user and our 2 constants. Even though they are constants, notice the range check serves 2 purposes. One is to check for the hours and the other is to check for the wage. We don't need a separate function to do it. We can do it with one function. We just have to pass the constants as 2 different parameters. So in this case, the constants being passed are the wage constants. And if we go down to our function, we receive it into 2 different parameters, local parameters here, min and max. And we check if value that they enter is greater than or equal to, should actually say greater than or equal to min, which is this min value, and less than or equal to max, this max value that's coming in, which happens to be wage in this case, then we return true. If not, we return false. So the first time in this if statement, we receive the wage, the minimum wage, and the maximum wage. If it is not, notice our if statement says if not range check, that means if it returns a false, not of that would be true, and so we would go into this and we would say its wage must be between minimum wage and maximum wage. That means it returned a false, that means they didn't enter the right value. If not, it would come here and it would say enter the hours worked. Notice we again call our error checking function to read the double, and we take hours into this variable, and then we check now to see if the hours is within the range. Now our range check function takes the minimum hours and the maximum hours constants. And if you go down and take a look, it's the same range check function. The range check function has not changed, but this min and max now receives the min hours and the max hours. And this value will receive the hours that the user enters. Then now we compare. Nothing has to change because the min and max now has changed to the hours because of the parameters that we have passed here. And again, it works exactly the same way. If it is not within the hours, then we come in here and say it must be between this hour and this hour, and we abort the program. So they have to restart the program at that point in time. So if all of this is good, then we come here and calculate pay with hours and wage. And our calculate pay function hasn't changed much. If you recall from our previous program, it essentially takes the hours and rate and checks to see if it is less than or equal to base hours, then it's just hours times rate. If it is greater than that, then we calculate the overtime pay and the base pay and add it to that. And then we go back, and once we have all of that, we print our gross pay and we are done. So let's take a quick look at our abort program, which says the same thing as we used to quit. It simply says please enter a character to quit, and we quit. So this program, if you run it, build it and run it, does all the error checking. Let's try a couple of things. So if I enter my hourly wage as ABC or something like that, it says enter valid number. So my hourly wage, let's say I enter is 45. It says your wage must be between $7.50 and $14. So how about, so then it says enter Q to quit. So because we quit at that point in time. Let's try it one more time. How about enter 12 for the wage and hours worked to be about, can't be more than 50, so I put in 45, and then it says your gross pay is $570.